Welcome everyone to another episode of Gooey's Dungeon Dive, the show where I rank all of the dungeons in The Legend of Zelda. I'm joined as always in this season by my good pal Corey Richmond. How is it going, Corey?
It's going good.
After ringing the bell atop Tower of the Gods, we make our way down below the surface of the Great Sea, and it is here where we are told that we will find the power we need to rescue our sister Errol. What we do initially find down below the surface is a castle frozen in time, filled with many moblins and dark nuts that are frozen as well. Clearly, this is the site of some sort of siege that took place.
It's just so jarring, and everything's all in this weird, filtered, muted tones, and you're like, what in the world? Where am I? What is going on? All the iconography is different from anything you've seen on the Great Sea, and it's something else.
We're getting some of that vibes of the lineage of the previous games that the whole game has been hinting at, which I think is very cool. We're told the power that we seek lies within the basement, which is underneath a statue of the Hero of Time. And we have to solve this little block puzzle that forms in the shape of a Triforce to open the way, and I always think that's a pretty cute puzzle.
Shout out to the triangle blocks. Innovative.
Yeah, you don't see a triangle block. What lies in the basement is none other than the Blade of Evil's Bane. I wrote down the Triforce.
Oop.
Whoops, but it's the Master Sword, of course. And removing it from its pedestal, it causes all of the castle to reanimate and spring back to life, including the Dark Nuts and the Moblins and such. We've got that classic sword unsheathing theme that plays when you first get the Master Sword in A Link to the Past and Ocarina of Time.
This moment is so amazing for so many different reasons. First I want to shout out the room that it's in. This is probably the coolest Master Sword room. You got all of the awesome stained glass, huge windows of the sages from Ocarina of Time, which is a fantastic callback. Even down to the fine details that I don't know if this is just in the HD version or not, but if you look on the ground around the Master Sword, there's carvings of the people of Hyrule praying, all praying towards the Master Sword. And then of course you have those huge armored statues that once you open it, they all put their swords down in a ring. I think that's so cool that think about the fact that we just finished Tower of the Gods, where the mini-boss of the entire dungeon was one Dark Nut, and now this whole room unfreezes and there are several Dark Nuts and a ton of Moblins. This is a moment where once you realize what you're gonna go upstairs and do, you're like, oh my gosh, this is terrifying.
Yeah, here we kind of get it's a chance to sort of test the thing out. It's like getting the sword in the beginning of the game times 100, where you kind of can go to town on all these enemies, and it's sort of this slaughter, I guess, of all the Dark Nuts and the Moblins, you know, 1 versus 100 or whatever.
It's so much fun too, because you're fighting some of them in tight hallways, you're fighting some of them out in the open, some of them on stairs, and you can pick up all of their weapons and just throw them across the room and hope it hits one of them. It's a lot of fun taking out these guys.
We actually have to take them out because there's a sort of a barrier now that's keeping us in, but once we do, we can then return to the surface, and the King of Red Lions points us in the direction of the Forsaken Fortress, and we can head there. But of course, you know, sailing and exploring, once again, it's an option, and especially so now because we get the bow from the Tower of the Gods, and we can kind of unlock the final piece of the sailing puzzle, which is, you know, over the course of the game, I'm sure many players have run into Cyclos, who is the brother of Zephos. They're the wind gods, the one who gave us the ability to alter the wind direction. Angered by the destruction of his monument, Cyclos has been menacing the seas with cyclones, and now that we have the bow, we can actually defeat him. And we sort of impress him, too. He's like, nice job. And
he's like, heck of an arm there, kid.
He calms down and he teaches us the Ballad of Gales, which lets us, you know, warp to various points across the Great Sea. Obviously very useful. At this point in the game, I don't really think there's a ton of new things to do that we haven't covered in previous ones, though obviously I went totally overboard in the last section uncovering the the whole sea, but there's still some charts that we picked up that can be recovered. But the ability to warp does make, doing stuff like the Great Deku Tree Sprout side quest a lot more doable. So I did end up doing that myself this time around. One little touch too is I feel like if you get it now, you're sort of tempted to warp to the closest island to Forsaken Fortress, which will actually take you inside this little grotto where a mysterious voice speaks to us saying we're destined to meet, but not yet.
You said last time was when you went ham and just went all around the overworld. That's kind of what I did this time. I especially want to shout out like Ballad of Gales. I might be biased, but I think this is one of the coolest fast travel methods in Zelda. One, just because like all of the areas that you can warp to are unlocked immediately, and that's super useful, especially in this game in tandem with the Swift Sail, because Ballad of Gales, the spots warp you to all the different points on the Great Sea to the point where you are never more than 2 squares away from wherever you want to be. And 2, just getting warped in a giant cyclone is rad.
Yeah, I think the amount of area that has been available for sailing has kind of scaled nicely in the game, where it hasn't felt that long. I would say in the last episode, it was where I was like, I was kind of going out of my way, but I feel like there wouldn't have been any harm in affording that sort of freedom, to the player to like letting you warp earlier, stuff like that. That's like kind of a minor nitpick, but once you do get it, I haven't had too much of an issue with getting from one place to another in the game so far. Our ultimate destination, though, is back to the Forsaken Fortress. And if the first time through was all about, sneaking around and stealth, our return is mostly causing a ruckus. Because the first thing we even have to do to get back in there is to take out the cannon and blow the doors down as, a bunch of cannons are firing at us. Makes for this nice rousing entrance, I think. And, we got the sword that shines in the darkness, as they say. And there's basically nothing that can stop us now. And we march basically right into a mini-boss battle with Phantom Ganon. He's this cool, spectral, almost Dark Knight-looking version, and like many puppets of Ganon in the past, we gotta play tennis with him.
Who doesn't love the Phantom Ganon theme? That's a nice homage to the A Link to the Past Ganon theme.
Yeah, it's a cool setting, right in that center area, where the spotlights were before, where they catch you right away. Now we're, just doing battle there, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's why I think it's such a cool contrast that, like, if you did that when you first went to Forsaken Fortress, some people might do that. They might just walk up onto that platform, get seen by a spotlight, and get thrown straight in jail. This time, you go right up there and you're like, bring it on, fellas. And Ganon's prepared, and his phantom doppelganger pops up and is like, all right, you're here, let's go.
That feeling continues when you defeat him. You get the skull hammer. We smash down these barbed barriers that are set about now in the dungeon, lets us smash our way to the top. And there's not much puzzling or like exploration here. You can kind of go around and, do stuff, but our goal is very clearly focused. It does give off, similar to like our sort of midway, like Hyrule castles and stuff like that in the past. It gives us this vibe of like a rising intensity. You don't even need to disable any of the spotlights that would have captured us up at the top before. They shoot bombs now, but with the items we've attained, we can pretty much bypass like those gaps, and you don't have to worry about it.
I do like, especially when you encounter the moblins, because like we talked about it on our first time through. The moblins, they feel a lot more high stakes back then, because it's like if you get seen, the camera shakes and they spin around and it's scary, and then you get captured and there's nothing you can do about it. And it's pretty satisfying going back into those hallways and whipping out the Master Sword and being like, all right, fools, who's getting got now?
It almost made me wish there was like some more of them, like on the direct path or something, that you didn't have to go out of your way just to like show that. But I guess we did just have that sort of in Hyrule Castle, so I think they do get that point across pretty well. When we make our way up to the captive's chamber, there doesn't seem to be any sign of the Helmerok King, which is nice. And it turns out that's because Tetra and her pirates were following close behind us, warding off the beast. And although Tetra gets a few more jabs in at Link, she's also startled by the Master Sword that is now on our back. And I don't know, I like this continuing story of like Tetra, you know, they've kind of fully turned now, and there's not really much of a question, but I like that the pirates have kind of been our pseudo companions along the whole game. You know, we kind of bumped into them a couple times and our story has kind of crossed, and we've had all these hints of Tetra having this sort of foreknowledge of like what's going on, you know, in the deeper lore of this world. And now like that moment of seeing the Master Sword, you know, it's all coming together, you know.
In her history and her backstory, she's clearly been told about this stuff or has learned about this stuff through something.
Her and the pirates, they take Errol and the other girls who were captured as we prepare for our final showdown here with the Helmerok King. It comes swooping down into the room as it begins to flood with water, and we get this very exciting little set piece where we gotta rush up the room as it floods, and you gotta dodge enemies that try to ambush you, and the Helmerok King tries to smash out the floor from under us. It's like a very thrilling, fun, like, it's almost the opposite of the Ocarina of Time escape sequence, you know, where you're just running up instead of running down. But I love that. It's just like a nice little moment, like, to set up the boss battle.
Super cinematic moment, immediately followed up by a super cinematic boss battle.
You know, it swoops up out as the floor kind of closes on us, and you've got all the, you know, the spotlights hitting the Helmerok King as it takes to the sky, and the battle, you know, really begins. And the fight itself is fun. It tries to swoop down on us and lash at us with its razor-sharp claws, and, you know, you gotta dodge out of the way, which could cause it to run into a wall, or the spikes that are across the top of the tower. And it comes down and tries to peck at us. And if we dodge that, it can get its head stuck in the ground, allowing us time to attack with the Skull Hammer. And much like the Helmasaur King in A Link to the Past, the hammer destroys the helm, protecting its face, which exposes it to sword strikes, and eventually, you know, we can take it down that way.
It kind of falls in line with some of the other Wind Waker boss battles, where they haven't really been super difficult so far, but I think they've all been stellar in terms of the cinematics of the fight. They're definitely leaning heavy on the presentation, especially with this one, because you're in this big open arena and it's like this revenge match. This is the bird that took your sister, and now you got this big cartoony hammer and you can smack its face with it.
Yeah, it's not necessarily my preferred method. Like I would always, I think I prefer like kind of the more, there's definitely more so in like the 2D games where it's like it's just a little bit more about, you know, testing your gameplay abilities more than anything. But I will say, like, this game has done what it's doing really well. So, like we said, it's got that big fight feel, and even when you take it out, it dies in this kind of not miraculous, but intense way with all the spotlights and everything. And even as its feathers are still floating to the ground, we can make our way up, you know, to confront Ganondorf, the master of the Forsaken Fortress. And there's some more parallels here to Ocarina of Time, because he reveals that by us removing the Master Sword from its pedestal, it actually released a seal that was holding his magic back. He easily takes down Link, but before he can land the final blow, Tetra swoops into the rescue, And when Ganondorf apprehends her, it reveals his part of the Triforce that he's been holding onto, as well as one that Tetra holds. Seeing this, he's stunned, and he actually proclaims that she is Princess Zelda.
I love that Tetra comes in and saves you. It does happen kind of fast, but that's such an interesting concept to me that, like, she doesn't even know. But because of this necklace that she's wearing, this something that's been passed down, we find out that it's been passed down, you know, through her family, and it's just something that she's had. Ganondorf, of course, out of all of everyone there, would be the person to recognize that, and he sees her necklace, he sees that it's a part of a piece of the Triforce, and he's like, that's it, I found you, I've been looking for you, you're Princess Zelda. And it brings back, you know, the whole reason Errol got kidnapped in the first place, and the reason the Helmerok King was, you know, going after Tetra is because we've known that the Helmerok King had been looking for pointy-eared girls, so clearly this is something that Ganondorf has been trying to do for a long time, and the fact that he just stumbles upon this discovery because Tetra saves you, I think it's a very fun set of circumstances, I think, for this reveal, this soft reveal.
I think it's fast, but I think it's, you know, this is meant to be like a very chaotic sort of moment, and we'll get into it more in the next episode, but that's about sort of the actual, like, you know, the part of the story where it's like, okay, let's try to figure out what's going on here, you know. Before he can do anything more with Tetra and us, we get a little rescue here, Lord of the Rings style. The Eagles show up, you know, Prince Kamali and Quill swoop in to the rescue, and they've come bringing Lord Valu, who torches up that room. I always love that kind of, that's like, this whole thing's very chaotic, and then like these guys show up and swoop in, it's all very like, whoa, 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 all these fun twists, and it's a very exciting cutscene.
I love watching Valu fly. He looks like he has no business flying.
It's all tiny. Lord Valu himself actually has this little vague discussion, you know, continuing that sort of trend with the King of Red Lions. We get the idea that there's still more to be done when we're not yet offered a full explanation like we're looking for, but he does rush us down below the sea again. We're beckoned through the pirate's charm to the chamber where we first gain the Master Sword. This annoys Tetra because she believes that only we were able to communicate through this charm, but we set off together to find the source of this voice, though we'll be discussing that in the next episode.
I think it's interesting that you visit this place, and then if you went right back to Forsaken Fortress, they immediately bring you back to this place, kind of the cause of where this big turn started to happen.
This is like kind of the area that's going to tie it all together, let's just say. As we can see, you know, we could see when we're down there that there is more to this area. There's a barrier that we didn't really talk about, but there's more to this area, so there's a lot of mystery, you know, what is this place fully? We obviously get the sense this is probably, you know, especially if you're coming to this from Ocarina of Time, this is probably like Hyrule Castle, something like that, you know, very familiar castle town, whatever, but there's still, like, it's still embedded in some mystery that we're going to explore more in future episodes. Of course, we got to revisit our ranking for the Forsaken Fortress because we return there, much like Hyrule Castle in A Link to the Past. We get a little double dip and sort of reevaluate. What do you think, Corey? Does this, you have it right now as kind of the lowest in Wind Waker. Does it boost it up at all, like in the overall game or on your overall list? What do you think?
So, definitely not in terms of the game. I still think this is one of my... I like it for what it is. Not one of my favorite dungeons in the game. And on my overall list, I had it at, I think, 46, right around there. And I'm only going to move it up 2 spots. I'm only moving it up to 44, so I moved it above Eastern Palace and Turtle Rock from A Link to the Past. And the reason for that is, you know, compared to Hyrule Castle, which is another dungeon where initially we go in, we have a small section, we have the sewers, and we're able to visit some of the castle, and then on return, you unlock a completely new area, which is basically a gauntlet. Not a lot of puzzle heavy stuff, but you end up it's cinematic and it's combat testing, and you go up to a sweet boss fight. And I think that serves really well as an addition to the dungeon. Whereas when you come back to Forsaken Fortress, all you really get are cool moments and a cool mini boss battle and a cool boss battle, which I really love those, but I don't think they add a ton to the quality of the dungeon, at least for me, because I don't know, it's hard to gauge because this dungeon feels so much less like a dungeon than many of the other dungeons on this list and most of the other dungeons in this game. So adding a boss fight definitely helps, but I don't know, it just feels more like a story set piece thing than a nice addition to the dungeon that rounds out this area as a dungeon. And getting the skull hammer, I think it's a really cool weapon, and I think it's a really cool item, but you don't really use it very much in this. You just use it for the fight against Helmerok King, and then you use it for those seemingly arbitrarily placed barriers that, you know, if you have the skull hammer, there's not really any point to have those up, because you're just gonna knock them down anyways, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not like, it's just like, here you go. I feel like it's just like, exciting thing to be doing as you're kind of smashing your way up to the final boss is how I feel.
But that just, it doesn't add, and I like doing that, but it doesn't add anything to the dungeon. That just feels like a cool story thing, like, oh hey, we came back and they added these barriers. They added some extra protection since we've been here last time, you know?
Yeah, for sure. It's not, it doesn't like change the dungeon massively or anything. Though it adds sort of to the feeling, you know, because you are being more blocked off. It's more intense the second time around. Okay, so I mean that's respectable. I pretty much agree with you. Like, I do agree that it doesn't feel like a dungeon like the rest of the game or series necessarily, but I think it's like kind of a strength of the dungeon, actually, because it feels so unique. It does feel like this real place. There are sort of like issues that I've, you know, taken with it, but I still feel like I'm very into this dungeon conceptually, similar to Hyrule Castle from A Link to the Past. Like, I just think it's an appropriate like set piece area. I think there's ways they could have handled it better, but I don't know, I just have strong feelings about it still, while at the same time I don't think I could raise it above any of the other dungeons in the Wind Waker still. But it is kind of right now, before we come back and complete it, it's relatively low. So while I don't think I'll move it up my Wind Waker list, I feel like I actually would move it up my dungeons list. I currently have it at 46. Was that the same as you, right?
Yeah.
I see it somewhere in the range between something like between Fire Temple and Hyrule Castle, for example, or I even think about it similar to like Thieves Town or something, where it's like it does a good job like with the thematics, which is what I like, it's strong suit. So I kind of see it in this range, actually. And it's still before we get to some of my more like complex and interesting dungeons, I think. And personally, also, I feel like I want to... this might be weird, but I kind of want to actually make a few changes here, if that's all right with you, now that I'm looking at it. I haven't looked at this.
You gotta do some housekeeping. You gotta make sure the list is up to date. Your feelings change all the time.
This is like kind of a historic moment. You're here for a historic change, but because of kind of what I said, and I felt like people felt like I ranked this too low, but looking at it now, I feel like Hyrule Castle, I feel like I can move down. I kind of want to move it down below Unicorn's Cave and even Wing Dungeon into a more appropriate spot. I actually like both those. I love Wing Dungeon. I love the little color element. I love the puzzles there. And Unicorn's Cave, I don't really have to explain why that's good. I ranked it lower than everyone else did anyway. So I want to give it its due by maybe moving it up above Hyrule Castle, which I think is an awesome intro to the game. Honestly, I think very highly of Hyrule Castle, and I believe I want to put the Forsaken Fortress right below Hyrule Castle. I think it does a similar thing, but for me personally, Hyrule Castle kind of hits an awesome beat of like an awesome intro to the game, and then this cool, exciting midpoint. And I don't have as many like sort of those smaller nitpicks with it that I have had with Forsaken Fortress. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it kind of evens out, because I think Forsaken Fortress does a ton of like really unique things that no other dungeon has done in a specific way. So it kind of evens out. So I think that's where I'm ultimately gonna have it. So kind of in the mid 30s range of my list. But you know, definitely it's getting a big boost up, and it's I think a pretty respectable spot for kind of an intro-ish sort of, as you said, like not even a real full dungeon, even though I guess it kind of is. You know, it has all of the trappings of a dungeon. It has, you know, a boss and everything. You just don't do it all at one point. But I don't know, I think that's a fairly respectable ranking, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it's a hefty boost.
Hefty boost, yeah. Because I put it, yeah, actually it is quite a hefty boost.
Let's just point out a few of the dungeons then that you're saying this is better than, and you let me know how these hit your ear. So you're saying
yes,
Forsaken Fortress is better than A Link to the Past Ice Palace.
Yeah, so I'm actually, I think I said I just don't really like the Ice Palace as much as everyone. I do appreciate, I think it nails kind of that iceberg thing. But yeah, I think just sort of the big loop navigational puzzle is a pretty unique, but you know, I think doing the big loop on the ice physics, I'm not a big fan necessarily of that. Okay. So it's all right with me. So yeah, so that's more of a personal thing.
Forsaken Fortress is greater than Death Mountain in the original Legend of Zelda.
Yes, I think so. I mean, I've ranked that, I think, relatively good. I would say most people wouldn't even have it above anything from, you know, Ocarina of Time or whatever, you know, games of that type. So I think I've given Death Mountain its due.
Yeah, that's respectable.
It's pretty remarkable for what it is.
Like that's.
Are there any other ones that seem weird?
Above Fire Temple. Well, I would say Thieves Town, because Thieves Town is way high up for me, but clearly it's just a different a different thing. I'm surprised to see it above Fire Temple from Ocarina of Time.
Fire Temple's another one where it's Fire Temple is similar but larger, where it's to me it is a big set piece dungeon. And it has a lot more in it, but there's, you know, I've kind of said before, there's a lot of rooms where it's like they just repeat the same puzzle, or it's not even really a puzzle. It's like, hey, you just got the hammer, smash this, you know, which is not that much different than this. I just think this one nails the thematics a lot better, you know.
Yeah.
These are all in the same league to me. Like,
yeah, they're
even
all
though
it seems all in the same chunk of your ranking.
This kind of area of my ranking is like, they're either large dungeons that I think are cool and thematic but could be better, or there's like some of these intro ones that I really like, but they're just the intro, so they're not, you know, they're not like in my top 10 or anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm sure some people think it's crazy that the Fire Temple is that low, but
that makes sense. You backed up your ranking.
I also think one thing I said about Ocarina of Time is a lot of those dungeons were made or broken on their big puzzle they had in the dungeon. And in that one I sort of explained how I thought they maybe over explained the big puzzle in that dungeon.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's over explained in this one. They give you your goal, which is to stop the lights but you have to kind of, navigate your way to them, and it's kind of open-ended, and while it's not very hard, I kind of respect just the freedom it gives more, to get around. So that's my thing with it, is I like it. Conceptually, I think it could have been better, but I still think it's a pretty cool dungeon. So we've got a nice teaser going. We don't know what's below. I mean, we know, you and I know, but
I don't know.
we're gonna really get it.
This is my first time playing.
I don't know. So what do you think? Is Tetra Zelda?
The signs are pointing to it, I think.
If only this disembodied voice that sounds a lot like the King of Red Lions.
Yeah, who's that guy? Could
tell us. We'll find out in the next episode of Gooey's Dungeon Dive. Yeah, Corey, thanks for joining me, and thanks to everybody for watching, and we'll see everybody under the sea. Now I'll end with Under the Sea playing.